There is a narrow strip of land at the bottom of Central America, where two oceans have been trying to merge for 3 million years. The Isthmus of Panama, 50 miles of suffocating jungle, volcanic rock, and pestilent swampland wedged between the Atlantic and the Pacific, has been obliterating human ambition since the first Spanish conquistadors hacked through its undergrowth in the 16th century and realized they were staring at the other side of the world. Vasco Núñez de Balboa crossed it in 1513 and nearly died doing it. The Spanish crown spent centuries dreaming of a canal through this cursed bottleneck and abandoned every plan. Napoleon's engineers studied it. They walked away. The Scottish tried to colonize the Darien Gap in 1698 and lost 2,000 settlers to disease, starvation, and the jungle itself. For 400 years, the isthmus collected the bones of the ambitious and the wreckage of their schemes, and the jungle swallowed every trace. Any sane calculation of the cost produces one inescapable verdict: walk away. The geography is a living weapon. Over 100 inches of annual rainfall transformed the terrain into a boiling, waterlogged hellscape for 9 months of the year. The Chagres River, a violent, unpredictable serpent cutting through the interior, floods with apocalyptic fury during the rainy season, swelling from a calm stream into a raging torrent capable of burying entire construction camps under walls of muddy water. And the jungle itself is a biological death machine. Dense, suffocating canopy that breeds mosquitoes by the billions, carrying yellow fever and malaria with lethal efficiency. The rational mind calculates the price in bodies and gold and says no. But in 1881, driven by the intoxicating arrogance of a man who had already split a continent in half at Suez, Ferdinand de Lesseps, a French diplomat with no engineering training whatsoever, declared that he would carve a sea-level canal straight through the spine of Panama. He raised 800 million francs from French investors. He recruited tens of thousands of workers, overwhelmingly from the Caribbean islands, and he marched them into the deadliest construction site on the face of the planet. What followed was not engineering, it was slaughter. Over 8 years, the jungle devoured the French operation whole. More than 22,000 workers perished, annihilated by yellow fever, malaria, landslides, and dynamite explosions. De Lesseps' company went bankrupt. He was convicted of fraud. The greatest engineering disaster of the 19th century left behind nothing but rusting machinery, mass graves, and a half-dug ditch filling with rainwater. This is the story of how the United States of America picked up where that catastrophe ended, launched the most audacious engineering assault on geography the modern world had ever seen, poured the equivalent of billions of dollars into the jungle floor, and completed the Panama Canal, paying for the miracle with the lives of over 5,600 workers who were buried beneath the very ground they had conquered. To truly grasp what the Americans were walking into in 1904, you must strip away every image of the modern canal and plunge into the environment as it existed before the first shovel struck soil. The Isthmus of Panama was not merely hostile, it was a coordinated killing field. The terrain was a geological nightmare, not a simple mountain range, but a chaotic patchwork of volcanic basalt, unstable clay, and fractured sedimentary rock, all of it saturated with water and prone to catastrophic landslides that could bury months of excavation work in a single afternoon. The air was a suffocating blanket of humidity so dense that metal tools rusted overnight and workers collapsed from heat stroke within hours. Temperatures regularly exceeded 120 degrees Fahrenheit on the exposed cut faces. And lurking in every puddle, every drainage ditch, every stagnant pool of rainwater were billions of Aedes aegypti and Anopheles mosquitoes, invisible assassins carrying yellow fever and malaria, diseases that killed with terrifying speed and absolute indifference to rank or nationality. During the French era, the hospitals themselves became death traps. Doctors unknowingly placed the legs of patient beds in pans of water to keep ants away, accidentally creating perfect mosquito breeding grounds inside the very wards where men were dying of mosquito-borne disease. The jungle was not a passive obstacle. It was an active, breathing predator designed to consume anyone who dared enter. Why did America charge into this graveyard? Because the mathematics of global power demanded it. In 1903, the United States was a rising imperial force, with coastlines on 2 oceans separated by 15,000 miles of voyage around the treacherous tip of South America. The Spanish-American War of 1898 had exposed this vulnerability with brutal clarity. The battleship USS Oregon took 67 days to race from San Francisco to Cuba, arriving almost too late. A canal through Panama would cut the journey to mere hours. Control the canal, control both oceans. control both oceans, control global trade. It was not a question of ambition. It was a question of survival as a world power. President Theodore Roosevelt, with characteristic aggression, orchestrated Panamanian independence from Colombia, signed a treaty granting the United States sovereign control of a 10-mile-wide canal zone, and ordered the most expensive construction project in American history to begin immediately. The first weapon deployed was not a steam shovel. It was a physician. Colonel William Crawford Gorgas, the Army's chief sanitary officer, was given the impossible task of defeating the mosquito before a single yard of dirt could be safely moved. Gorgas launched a sanitation campaign of military intensity, draining every puddle, oiling every ditch, screening every window, fumigating every building with pyrethrum and sulfur. His teams cleared brush, installed drainage systems, and imposed strict quarantine protocols across the entire canal zone. Within 2 years, yellow fever was eradicated from Panama. Malaria was slashed by over 90%. Gorgas had achieved what the French never imagined possible. He had declared war on the jungle's most lethal weapon and won. Only then could the real assault on the terrain begin. The engineering approach that defeated the isthmus was a decisive rejection of de Lesseps's sea-level fantasy. Chief engineers John Stevens and later George Washington Goethals designed a lock canal, a system that would lift ships 85 feet above sea level into an artificial lake created by damming the wild Chagres River, carry them across 23 miles of flooded jungle, and lower them back down to the ocean on the other side. It was a weapon of brute mechanical force, married to hydraulic elegance. The centerpiece was the Culebra Cut, later renamed the Crawford Cut, a 7.8-mile gash carved through the Continental Divide, the single most difficult excavation ever attempted by human hands. The statistics fracture comprehension. Workers excavated over 232 million cubic yards of earth and rock, enough material to build a wall 14 feet high, circling the entire equator. They poured nearly 5 million cubic yards of concrete into the lock chambers, structures with walls 45 feet thick at the base, built to physically wrestle gravity itself into submission. 3 sets of locks, at Gatun, Pedro Miguel, and Miraflores, each with chambers 1,000 feet long and 110 feet wide, would hoist and lower the largest ships on Earth using nothing but the gravitational flow of water from a man-made lake. They constructed the Gatun Dam, an earth and rock colossus 1.5 miles long that drowned the Chagres River Valley to create Gatun Lake. At the time of its completion, the largest artificial body of water on the planet, covering 164 square miles of former jungle. At its peak, 40,000 workers swarmed the site simultaneously. The operation consumed more dynamite than any peacetime project in history. The initial campaign was a spectacle of mechanized fury. Over 100 Busaira steam shovels, industrial leviathans belching smoke and thunder, attacked the Culebra Cut from both sides simultaneously, ripping 5-ton bites of rock and clay from the Continental Divide. A fleet of over 600 railcars hauled the excavated earth away on a constantly shifting railroad network. The jungle was pushed back. The mountains began to shrink. Early milestones were achieved at exhilarating speed, and a ferocious optimism surged through the canal zone. The Americans were doing what the French could not. The isthmus was yielding. Then the earth fought back with everything it had. The Culebra Cut became a living nightmare. The same unstable geological formations that had tormented the French now unleashed catastrophic landslides on the American crews. Walls of mud and rock that engineer David Gaillard called tropical glaciers, massive, unpredictable avalanches that slid into the cut without warning, burying steam shovels, obliterating rail lines, and erasing months of excavation in minutes. Workers were crushed. Equipment was swallowed. The Americans removed millions of cubic yards of material beyond the original estimates simply to fight the slides. Dynamite explosions killed men who stood too close or failed to hear the warning blasts. Workers fell from scaffolding into the flooding lock chambers. And even with Gorgas's miraculous sanitation campaign, malaria continued to claim lives, reduced, but never eradicated. The official death toll during the American construction reached 5,609 souls. The vast majority were black West Indian laborers from Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad, men paid in silver under a brutally segregated gold and silver roll system, assigned the most dangerous tasks, housed in the worst barracks, and given the least medical attention. Their names were largely unrecorded. Their graves were largely unmarked. The canal was built on their bodies. Jump to the modern era. The Panama Canal opened on August 15, 1914, and the world immediately forgot the war that made it possible, Today, approximately 14,000 vessels transit the canal annually, carrying over 5% of all global maritime trade. Billions of dollars flow through this 50-mile corridor every year. The civilized world treats it as a permanent, effortless feature of global logistics. But the jungle has never stopped fighting. The same Chagres River that was dammed to create Gatun Lake remains a volatile, unpredictable force, and climate change is now weaponizing it against the canal. In 2023, a devastating drought driven by El Niño conditions dropped Gatun Lake to record low water levels, forcing the Canal Authority to slash daily transits from 36 ships to just 22 and impose restrictive draft limits that forced vessels to carry less cargo. Global supply chains buckled, millions of dollars in shipping delays accumulated. The canal, designed to harness the river, was suddenly being strangled by the river's absence. Meanwhile, landslides continue to plague the Crawford Cut, requiring constant dredging and slope stabilization. The tropical climate corrodes every exposed surface. The lock mechanisms, now over a century old in their original sections, demand relentless precision maintenance. An expansion completed in 2016 added a massive third set of locks for the new generation of post-Panamax megavessels, but even this $5 billion upgrade merely postpones the fundamental confrontation. The canal exists at the mercy of rainfall, and rainfall is at the mercy of a climate that no longer behaves predictably. The paradox cuts to the bone. To the shipping executive reviewing transit schedules on a laptop screen, the Panama Canal is a line on a spreadsheet, efficient, reliable, permanent. To the engineers who maintain it, it is an aging wound carved through the most geologically unstable, climatically violent strip of land on Earth, held open by a daily, exhausting, invisible struggle against mud, water, corrosion, and the relentless biological fury of a jungle that has been trying to reclaim its territory since the day the first French shovel pierced the soil in 1881. Great engineering does not conquer the Earth. It negotiates a temporary ceasefire, paid for in advance, in full, in human lives. They carved a continent in half, drowned a river valley, and built a machine that lifts ocean-going vessels 85 feet into the sky. And every single day, the jungle grows a little closer to the concrete. The river tests the dam, and the earth shifts beneath the locks, patiently waiting for the terms of that ceasefire to expire. Because sometimes, hidden beneath the waterline of the most important shipping lane on the planet, there is an old, exhausting, unfinished reckoning. A reckoning between humanity's compulsion to force a passage where none was meant to exist, the violent indifference of a jungle that has been swallowing civilizations for millennia, and the 27,000 anonymous souls, French, American, Caribbean, whose bones lie scattered in the mud beneath the greatest engineering miracle the world has ever seen.